Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Kay, and we're here to review One Piece Live Action Season 2, Episode 6. Now, before we get started, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and let's dive into it. Now, I think if you were going to adapt something for live action, specifically a manga, this is the episode to use as your blueprint. I did not think anything about this episode felt off or wrong. There's a few little things that I have questions about, but for the most part, this episode is really good. And I was pleasantly surprised with how this episode came across. So one of the first questions I have is how much they're including Robin in this, because here, Miss All Sunday is actually speaking with Wapol. It looks like she's in some sort of submarine. I believe this is possibly the ship that Wapol was sailing on, or this could be somewhere like Rain Dinners. I'm not exactly 100% sure. Rain Dinners should look more fantastic, but if this is the back office, then yeah, it's going to look a little sleazy. But here is the first change, and I don't know that I'm bothered by it. So here, Miss All Sunday gives Wapol his fruit, the Munch Munch fruit. Now, in the manga, Wapol eats this years before the story actually happens. So he's very familiar with his powers. So it's interesting to me to see him here getting this fruit from her. Now, this could be that, you know, we're going to find out, oh, this was actually a flashback while he was not in the kingdom, and he's had this fruit for a little longer than we expect. But it is interesting that this would be something that Baroque Works would do. I do find it interesting that Wapol is also a financier of Baroque Works, which is a very interesting way to tie him into the story. For those who don't know, in the manga, Wapol is actually kind of a loser. He's not a good villain at all, in the sense that he's easily beatable. Luffy basically gets rid of him with a single punch, although there is a lot of other things that happen with a fight. But basically, Wapol is not good at fighting or anything like that. He's a terrible king. We definitely get that from this episode. But it was very interesting to see them make him a little bigger than he is. Because if this is going to be the threat you end your season with, he should at least feel imposing somehow. Now, one thing Miss All Sunday mentions is that the Drum Kingdom has actually been abandoned by Blackbeard, which I find interesting. We know that Blackbeard was the one who came to Drum Kingdom. Ace is looking for him. For those of you who are live action only, Ace is a character who's going to show up in Season 3, unless he somehow makes a cameo here at the end of Season 2, which I highly doubt. But he does show up on Drum Kingdom looking for Blackbeard at one point, and he is on the hunt for this character. So I like that they throw that in there very early, and we get to hear about it. See, in the manga, they talk about pirates coming to town, and you eventually find out it's Blackbeard, but to get it just up front, to know that Blackbeard is coming, is pretty exciting for the fandom. So here we have a scene of Nami sick on the Mary. It's a very good scene. It's very heartfelt. Sanji is taking care of her. Nami finds out she's been out for 4 days. I think that's a great touch to make this disease obviously more serious than Nami originally thinks that it is. Now, they've brought back the Nami-Sanji dynamic, where Sanji dotes on her more so than anybody else, and I'm kind of okay with that. I just do find it interesting that when it comes to Nami, Sanji immediately just forgets everyone exists. Now, we do go outside the ship to talk to everyone, and Vivi says, you know, we have to go find a doctor. That has to be plan number one. And this is directly from the manga, because Vivi is a loving and caring person, and we get to see that in this episode when we flash back to her as a little girl. Now, before we actually get to Drum Island, we're going to catch up with Smoker and Tashigi. Now, if you're watching this and you're like, why are we watching Smoker and Tashigi, especially as someone who's a manga reader or an anime-only person, well, this actually happens. We just don't see it. You see, Smoker and Tashigi go to the island of Renace, and they find Miss Thursday and Mr. 11. This is where Mr. 11 gets captured. We never get to see it in the manga, but I thought this was a great touch in a way to bring part of the story that we don't get to see into it. It's just like Zoro fighting Mr. 7 at the beginning of Season 1. See, we're told how this happens, but we never actually get to see it. So it's great to see them take something that is extended canon, if you want to put it that way, and put it into the adaptation. And it helps you understand that Smoker and Tashigi are important, and they are following the Straw Hats and getting to Alabasta. This was really fun to see. The Straw Hats then arrive at Drum Island, and Vivi remembers that, hey, this is Drum Kingdom, but we got to keep everything quiet. We have a problem with the King of Drum Kingdom, who is Wapol, who we met at the very beginning of the episode. This is a fun moment because in the manga, Wapol is actually on the ship. we meet him. It's a very goofy moment. He tries to eat part of the Mary. Luffy sends him flying, and then they eventually make it to Drum Island. But to not have him here, it didn't feel out of place, especially with the tone that they're going for in the live action. And to see Vivi begin to think, we start to get a flashback of the Reverie. This is really cool. Why is the Reverie so important? Well, you see, we get many Reveries in the One Piece manga, including this flashback of Vivi at the Reverie. Now, Wapol, in the manga, very similar. He gets chastised by King Cobra. Getting to see this moment of Vivi's father, he definitely fits the bill of Cobra. He has that command, that presence, and that compassion for his people that we know Cobra to have. This is probably one of the most underrated castings of the season because he's not going to be in it that much. He really is an Alabasta-focused character, but it was nice to get to see him here. In the flashback of the Reverie, we get a lot of other teases to the larger world of One Piece. We get kings such as Hamburg, King Tacos, and of course, King Seki. He's the vampire-looking one who talks. See, Seki is the king of a nation named Lelouchia that serves a big purpose in the story, both in a cover story involving Ace, the character I mentioned earlier who's going to show up later, as well as the main plot of the story much further down the road. Now, during this Reverie flashback, we see Wapol and Cobra arguing. Wapol gets angry, and we see his confrontation with Vivi. Now, in the manga, he bumps into Vivi, and it's played off a little more as, oh, I'm kind of a spoiled king, and I'm going to do this. Here, it's vicious. The slap across little girl Vivi really puts into perspective Vivi's response and how dignified it was. It's a very cool moment, and a lot stronger than it was in the manga. Now, we do get to see Vivi and Igaram interact, and that's great. Knowing that the smack does happen a little later in the episode than the first flashback to the Reverie is okay, because we get these fun moments of Vivi and Igaram, and we understand the relationship that they had, including Igaram using the handkerchief that was burned 2 episodes ago to essentially wipe the tears out of Vivi's eyes, something that would put tears back in her eyes later in her life. So the Reverie doesn't just stop with Vivi, King Cobra, Wapol, and a little bit of Dalton and his regret in serving his new king, which I'm sure we'll get more of that in later episodes because that really does happen in a different flashback involving Chopper, who we see at the end of the episode. But there's so much here in the Reverie. They mention the Warlord system, they question the Warlord system, and they mention the assassination of Queen Otohime. Now that is the impetus for a lot of what happens in the very first arc after the Straw Hats come back from a 2-year time skip that happens in the manga. See, Queen Otohime's goal is to get Fishman Island involved in the world at large and take away the stigma of fish people and get them involved. And her assassination echoes throughout the entirety of the One Piece world. And for them to be talking about it here is really important. So after this, we cut back to Smoker on Rene's Island. He and Tashigi split up, and he ends up finding Miss Thursday. Now, I thought this was interesting because we've never actually been given Miss Thursday's design, powers, or anything else, so they really had it up to interpretation what they wanted to do here. And I thought it was interesting that they decided to go with the baseball theme, because Mr. 9 uses baseball bats, and then of course the biggest baseball user in Baroque works that I think of is Mr. 4. Because you could argue Mr. 9 isn't really using baseball bats, they're just bats or clubs that he uses made of metal, whereas Mr. 4, his entire thing is baseball, and he has a dog that turns into a bazooka. It's actually a bazooka that turns into a dog. That's a whole nother story for next season, but this thing spits out the baseballs and he hits them with tremendous force into his opponents. So for them to basically use her as another baseball theme doesn't feel completely out of place, but it did feel a little lazy. I'm not overly mad about it because Smoker handles her pretty quickly, and this kind of calls into question the strength of Baroque works. Yes, Luffy and crew take down Mr. 3, who is a lot stronger than Miss Thursday and Mr. 11, but at the same time, it was a team effort, and it took a lot more of a fight, whereas here, Smoker just basically takes Miss Thursday out with a single hit. It's good to see Smoker get wins. That ain't gonna happen a lot. I like Smoker. We cut back to the Straw Hats arriving on Drum Kingdom, and what actually happens in the manga is they're met at the port by the citizens of Drum Kingdom. Instead, they have to walk up to the city, this makes a lot more sense, and I'm okay with the way that they've changed it. The one difference being that Zoro does end up staying on the ship at one point, protecting it while also training in the cold. He ends up defeating a guy and taking his jacket from him. We don't get that here. Zoro goes ahead and puts the jacket on. He's a part of the crew, and I'm actually okay with this. I don't think it's necessary to have Zoro wait on the ship because we're not going to get the avalanche moment that he has. We're not going to get him swimming through the cold water, and that's okay. Because again, when you're doing an adaptation, you're not going to get everything. So we want to make sure that Zoro is involved in this arc, and I think he's involved in a great way. So him being here really works for me. Now everything else plays out exactly like the manga. They fire, Vivi gets shot, Luffy gets angry, but Vivi dissolves the situation because she, of course, is a princess. She understands diplomacy. She's seen it. She's snuck in on her father doing it at the Reverie. She's seen him do it throughout the entirety of her life. And now this is her opportunity to enact that in real life. Luffy understands as a captain, and he's able to respond in a way that shows him to not only be willing to learn how to be a better captain, but also willing to take care of his crew in the best way possible. And also to trust them. Because during this entirety of everything leading up to Alabasta and Alabasta itself, Vivi is a member of the crew. And Luffy respects and listens to his crew. Well, when he needs to. Now, what's interesting during this exchange is we find out that the person who shot Vivi is a character named Maria. Now, Maria in the story actually is just a woman who lives in Bighorn Village. They mistake her for Hiking Bear, a character who is extremely polite and must be bowed to that lives on Drum Kingdom. It's a very funny moment, and to see them give her a different role and still honor that she's in the story is very cool because they're obviously not going to do the whole Hiking Bear thing. But without the Hiking Bear, we are aware that the Woolly Hippo is alive and available somewhere in Drum Kingdom. Wapol does wear the Woolly Hippo skin around him, and that's really cool that they kept that. The one thing that I am a little worried about is that we're not going to get to actually see a Woolly Hippo. Now, this is from someone who hasn't seen episodes 7 and 8, so if it's in there, super cool. If not, I want to see how it works out, because they've really taken a lot of the animal characters out, including the Loppans. I understand why the Loppans aren't here. They are really a side antagonist of this arc, and really they're only an antagonist for a couple minutes before Luffy saves one and they become friends. Not adapting this scene is okay, but at the same time, not getting the Loppans was a little hard for this manga reader to see, but it doesn't matter. The scene, everything still goes well. We see Loppan skins and stuff in the cabins, which tells us they are there. They're just not going to adapt that, and that's perfectly okay. We do get a more doubtful Usopp here, which I think is okay. Usopp is clearly scared for Nami and everything that's going on, but it is fun to see him kind of get back to his cowardly self after everything that happened in the episode before. So we get to see Tashigi fight Mr. 11 as we're back on the base at Rene's. Now, this is also interesting because we know Mr. 11 gets captured and we're not 100% sure how. We're just told Smoker captures him. So Tashigi fights him, knocks him out. Smoker kicks him in the ribs after he comes back in the room for good measure, and it's really kind of an interesting thing because Smoker, clearly strong enough, he kills Miss Thursday. Tashigi, not really wanting to kill anybody, just knocks Mr. 11 out, but that's what they need. They need a hostage they can interrogate. So Smoker interrogates Mr. 11, tries to ask him questions. He says he's not going to talk. He knocks him out with smoke, and then they go to talk to a transponder snail. This is one of the scenes that had me questioning some things because in the manga, Mr. 11 is actually tricked by Smoker into revealing all the information. He's still tied up on their ship when they arrive in Alabasta, and it's members of Baroque Works who go onto that ship who end up killing Mr. 11. Here, Mr. 11 isn't dead, but we don't know that he's going to be brought with them. We do know that there is a transponder snail there who's barely alive, which begs the question, why didn't Smoker try to get this transponder snail to work first and then question Mr. 11? I'm not 100% sure. We do know that Miss Thursday won't be making an appearance because he admits here that, yeah, he straight up killed her, which, again, no One Piece character is ever going to have the opportunity to come back later. They don't run away and hide like she does in the manga. We find out that she runs away. They're just going to die. They're just going to die. Miss Thursday's dead. Like every other dead character. Does that mean Igaram's actually dead? Weird. So while we're in the villages of Drum, there's no Kureha and Chopper here. See, they actually make an appearance in one of the villages on Drum Kingdom earlier in the arc, but it's okay that they don't show up here, and that's because they want to save this reveal for the end of the episode. It works very well. When they're deciding who is going to go up onto Drum Mountain, because the gondola was taken out by Wapol, which again, directly from the manga, Luffy says he'll take Nami, Sanji says he's going with him, Zoro offers to go with him, which is further proof that Zoro really cares about his crewmates. Sanji, however, in a moment of real sincerity with him, says, no, Vivi's still hurt. You have to stay here. Baroque Works is chasing after us, and you have to protect them. This is a moment where we see that Sanji and Zoro can work and cooperate together. And Sanji is not downing Zoro, is also complimenting him slightly, but in a way that makes it sound like, listen, you have to be important because you have to protect the rest of our friends. I will help Luffy. And again, this really does the whole Nami-Sanji connection, which I know I've really felt the last season they've really tried to develop, which makes me wonder if they're going to do Whole Cake and how that relationship is going to change once Whole Cake Island happens. Or more importantly, I guess, is going to change once Zoe happens and then the start of Whole Cake Island, but we'll see. Zoro doesn't handle being sidelined here well. He, in his own way of thinking about Nami and her safety, is questioning that he should have went. It shouldn't have been the cook. Now, this is the rivalry coming through, and Zoro's always going to keep that on the forefront of his mind. But he's genuinely worried about Nami, and he wants to see her. What I didn't like here, and this is the only thing in the episode that made me kind of raise my eyebrow, was Usopp, rather than be afraid or yell at Zoro in a very comic way, he yells at him in a very serious way. Zoro gets upset and he leaves and goes to be with Dalton. Usopp doesn't really regret it, and that's kind of strange to me. That's not really in Usopp's character, and it's not in Zoro's character to let being yelled at pass him by. Now, I do think Zoro would have been the bigger man in the situation. We've seen that a lot, but this was the one moment in the episode that kind of had me curious. Now, we also get to see Vivi have a moment where we hear about her struggle and everything she's going through, and it really feels palpable here. Usopp attempts to comfort her, and he gives her a speech that really feels more like what Luffy would have given her. There's a scene I'm thinking of in Alabasta where Luffy's telling her, you can't save everybody, you can't do everything, and it feels like they gave part of that here to Usopp. They're really trying to include the entire crew in more things. I don't know how I feel about it. We'll have to see once Alabasta actually gets here. But this is the most out of character Usopp has had the entire show. Not sure how I feel about it, but I don't dislike it. It is just one of those things that made me kind of, Now, we get time with Dalton here, speaking with Zoro, and I really enjoy the actor playing Dalton. I think the look is great. His attitude is great. He's really carrying the character well. And they're obviously still worried about Blackbeard in some way, but they're really worried about Wapol's return. Zoro pledges to give his sword to this shield of the nation, and it's really great to see they kept this for Dalton. Dalton doesn't want the leadership role in Drum Kingdom. He wants to protect the people, and he still feels guilty about everything that Wapol did while he was under his command. I'm not sure if they're going to completely go into it in the next 2 episodes, but for those who are live action only, Dalton was actually a servant of the previous king, and in his loyalty to the previous king, he continues to serve Wapol, and he regrets those decisions as well as everything that happens at the Reverie. There's a scene that's going to happen in either episode 7 or episode 8 where Dalton essentially quits this job, and it's his moment of trying to atone for that. And I'm really thankful that they showed Dalton's desire not to be the leader. But Zoro says something very profound here, which is, you don't always have that choice. Again, it's something, like I said, they're trying to get all the Straw Hats involved and be very wise, and it's a moment that Dalton's going to have to reckon with, and I'm thinking he's going to have to reckon with it by the end of episode 8. So this is where the climb to the top of the mountain on Drum Kingdom ends, and we don't get the scene of Luffy carrying Sanji along with Nami for as long as we did in the manga and the anime. And like I said, there's a scene with a Lapun where he saves one. There's these giant murderous rabbits. We see their skins in the village. We don't get that moment. Instead, Sanji falls, gets hurt, and Luffy throws him up on top of the mountain. Again, if you're going to adapt it and you're going to change some things, especially for time's sake, this is a very good way to do it. It shows that Luffy had to save Sanji. I love the stretching his neck rubber effect catching him. He does catch him with his mouth in the manga. He ends up carrying him. And this is a fun moment to get to see actually put into live action. And it gets everything done super quick. Now, at the top of the mountain, Luffy begins to pass out, and we see Chopper and Heavy Point. It's very blurry, but that foot looked real. I do know they used prosthetics for Heavy Point Chopper. I'm very curious to see how he looks in the next episode, because I'm going to go ahead and let you know, I've seen Heavy Point Chopper, and I've got to see it in live action. Stills are not doing it justice. We'll see how that goes. Now, this is what I think is the crowning achievement of this episode. We've built everything up. We've gotten them all the way to the top of the mountain on Drum Kingdom. They're entering the castle. Nami wakes up. Nami is confused. She looks. Everything happens just like in the manga. She sees the PICC line in her hand, the IV. If it's not a PICC line, just let me know. But I don't know a lot about hospital stuff. I just know I've been in a hospital, so, you know. But Nami wakes up. She has this moment looking around, confused, and she sees Chopper. She immediately starts talking to him. He runs. Chopper hides behind the wall, just like he does in the manga, where he does it backwards. He tells her to shut up, but it's very adorable. It's very funny. Chopper here feels like Chopper. And this is something I definitely wanted to see and talk about for the live-action adaptation, because apparently they wanted to make Chopper more human-like and make him feel more grounded. But Oda insisted on making him cute and cartoony, and I think that was the right call. The thing that comes to mind most recently is Sonic the Hedgehog. Do you remember the first Sonic the Hedgehog trailer we got? Yeah, that thing still haunts the nightmares of children and adults. But they changed it because fans said, no, that's not how Sonic's supposed to look. They went to this cartoony video game classic look. The Sonic the Hedgehog films have been great. They're instant classics for nostalgia and just fun adventures to watch with your family. That's what they've done with Chopper. They have kept him looking like he does in the manga and the anime, and it does nothing but good things for this story. And I loved it. But what I might have loved a little more than Chopper was the introduction of Kureha. So while watching this episode, as soon as Kureha enters and the music and we get her cackle laugh, which remember, I've said laughter is important and how people laugh is important, and she walks on the screen, the only thought in my mind was Katie freaking Seagal. This casting was a grand slam. As a big baseball guy, this one is perfect. She plays the role, she has the attitude, she has the look. For those of us who are my age, we remember growing up watching Katie Seagal on different shows, including Married with Children, which was the big one, the first one we got introduced to her to. Then I believe there was 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, probably when we were all teenagers at the same time. This is phenomenal. A lot of people know her as Jax's mom from Sons of Anarchy. Sorry, I don't remember the character's name. I never actually finished that show. Let me know if I should in the comments. She is also the voice of Taranga Leela from Futurama. This is someone that has been around for several decades as a career, and she's done a great job. And here she is with another role that she's taken, and just, I was excited. This was the first time watching season 2 that I've really been this way. I was so excited to see Chopper. I was so excited to see Kureha, and the way they played it was perfect. When she's talking to Nami about the disease and Chopper's answering, it's great. They even kept in the part where it was Kestia, a tick from Little Garden. That whole part is phenomenal, and I was just over the moon getting to watch this. Now, we also get a fun moment of Luffy screaming through the castle, and that's kind of what happens in the manga. He screams, wakes everybody up, Sanji gets mad at him. This part is really fun, and we get to see Luffy and Sanji see Nami getting better, and then they see Chopper. And we've already seen that in the teasers and everything, but getting to see Luffy see Chopper with how I was very overly emotive was a lot of fun. It felt like Luffy and I were both seeing Chopper for the very first time, wondering, who is this little reindeer dude, and what are we gonna do? And he is genuinely excited. He's also hungry, which is not a surprise, but this moment was chef's kiss. This was what we had been waiting for this entire episode, and I was so happy to see it. One more thing I wanted to point out before I close this out. The name of the episode is Nami Dearest, and Dear is spelled D-E-E-R. The titles have been really phenomenal for this season. Between Wax On, Wax Off, Big Trouble in Little Garden. I've been a real fan of the titles, and whoever is doing the titles, give that person a raise. So that's been my review of episode 6, and this has been the episode. It is the most well done adaptation of any of the chapters here in season 2. It takes the story. They know they have to cut some parts out. It's not going to be great to cut those parts out because the people making the show love it, but they know what they're going to do is a good adaptation. It's going to tell the story, and it's going to make us feel like Drum Kingdom is alive. This was a very good job. Episode 6 might be my favorite in the entire series so far, and I'm really excited to see episodes 7 and 8. Seeing Dr. Heerlook in the costume and everything in stills has been, I don't have words for it. He looks great, and so I'm really excited to see the backstory with Chopper. I've seen a lot of people posting and talking about how it made them cry. It is a very emotional thing, so I'm very interested to see how they adapt it. But you go ahead and let me know in the comments. Is there anything I missed? Anything you saw differently? Any different thoughts that you had? I'd love to read about them. Also, make sure you're subscribed, share this with your friends, throw it a like, and I'll see you in the next one. We didn't get Karu, but we got Chopper. I'm okay with that.